Hey, good evening, guys. So I'm happy to be back on the Monday schedule of uploading things. I know the last couple of videos has been on Tuesdays, but I'm glad to finally be, in a place where I can do these on Monday instead. So I hope everything's going okay so far. I want to start out with this week's video just kind of by talking about some of the things that I've noticed in looking at your work so far. And then I'm going to shift gears a little bit from what's normal. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Project One, and then the weekly stuff, and then we'll move on. So I'm pretty much just about through Project One so far. I'm really happy with what I see. You guys have a lot of good information, a lot of detail there. That's really going to benefit you for when you go into, your later projects and you're having to do a lot of research within the field itself. And so a lot of the things that you guys brought to the table in Project One will set yourself up for an easier time doing research later on. And so the research guide is something that I don't want you to think of as like dead and gone and over with, but as an actual guide that will help you throughout the rest of the project. So, continuously, return back to that, use the information that you gathered, and use that as a tool to help your life become a whole lot easier in the next projects. Okay. And so if you haven't gotten Project One back, you will within the next 24 hours or so. But again, I'm pretty much through all of them so far. The other thing that I wanted to do before we get started on the kind of bulk of this video is to talk about the week 5 activities, which are on deck starting today. So as you'll notice, we are working again towards Project 2. Now, your last blog should have started you off on Project 2 by asking you to summarize the 2 texts that you wanted to use. So remember, Project 2 asks you to summarize and analyze and compare 2 different articles, one from this class that I've assigned you, like the Wardle, the Beauwarsheen Reeve, those articles, so one of those, and compare that to an article that you found that's from your community. Now, I know a lot of you didn't do the blogs this week for whatever reason, but it's something that you'll have to do anyway, so make sure that you're starting to do that work. Okay, so as you'll notice for this week, we've got a couple things going on. So in terms of reading, the only thing I really want you to do is to review Chapter 6, which you've already had a chance to take a look at, just to continue to think about how you're reading and evaluating sources. The other thing that you'll be doing is uploading a draft of Project 2. Now again, these drafts are obviously not complete documents. What I would love to see for this draft is just some fleshed out summaries that you did for your 3rd blog post, combined with some of that genre inventory list that you did for your 2nd blog post, right? So show me some summaries of the 2 articles that you want to use, and then start to show me some of that identification section. What are some of the elements that you're seeing in these articles that you will want to talk about? And that's really all I'm looking for in terms of a rough draft in this. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then make sure you go back to those sample essays in the video that I posted to kind of get a refresher. The other thing that you have for this week is to take quiz 2. I checked the questions for this quiz. Hopefully they're a little bit better than the quiz ones. We shouldn't have any problems on it. But again, remember, for all of these things, the deadlines are set. And so if I say 11:59 midnight, that means the Dropbox is going away at 11:59 at midnight, because that's the cutoff. So make sure you're saving yourself enough time to do that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit then about the actual work that we're doing. I know sometimes these videos turn into just, here's what you have to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. But for this project, because genre analysis is kind of weird, I wanted to spend more time actually talking about the concepts that we're doing instead of just the work that you're doing. And so I want to start out with just a kind of a discussion of what genre is. Now, we've had a chance to engage with this concept a little bit throughout the last few weeks, and I just want to keep reinforcing the idea of genre as something more than just the category that you see on iTunes when you pick what kind of music that I want to listen to or whatever, or the category that you see when you're looking for different movies. Genre absolutely is category, but it's more than that. And here's how I want you guys to keep thinking about this, and it's something that I've talked about a little bit before. I want you to think about genre as a tool. Genre as a tool that facilitates communication. Genre as a tool that helps people communicate. And so what I mean by that is a genre is a thing that contains a lot of information, and it communicates that information really quickly and effectively. And so let's return to that category idea for a minute. And so again, if I said I saw a horror movie or a comedy movie, those categories are a genre, right? And by saying that, I'm communicating a lot of information to you. So you know the basic elements of a horror and a comedy movie, so I don't have to describe the movie itself. If I just say horror or comedy, you understand a little bit about what I actually saw. And so in that the name, the category is a tool that I'm using to communicate all that information without having to go into detail. So branching off from that, then, what I want you to think about genre is in the other kind of things that we're seeing within your communities. So for example, in the medical community, if you have that patient history form, right, where when you go into the hospital or whatever and you have to fill out your medical history and all those things, that form is a genre. It is a set document with rules that govern, its use, that govern, what's on it, where it's used, who uses it, that allows the patient and the doctor to communicate and interact with a lot of different information being exchanged very quickly. So from just one form, the doctor gets a good sense of everything he or she needs to know in order to effectively treat this patient, right? And it's just one form that you're handing them. So again, it's a tool that they're using to communicate all that information. Instead of just sitting down for like a 2-hour interview and just shooting off the questions that come to their mind, they have this set thing that remains the set thing that we can use in a lot of different. So I could hand that to any patient. So here's how I want you to think about it, though, because for this assignment, what we're doing is we're looking at the academic article as a genre, in the same way that we're looking at the patient history form as a genre, or the category of horror movie and comedy movie as a genre. We're looking at the academic article as a thing, as a tool that we're using to communicate a lot of information really quickly. And so that's how I want you to think about this when you're looking at these articles. It's not just what is this one thing saying, this one piece of paper in front of me, but more so, what is this one thing representing? It's representing an entire genre of articles. They're all adhering to the same kind of rules, the same kind of terms. They're all doing similar things in order to communicate a lot of information. And that's the key thing about genre, is that genre has to remain somewhat, or have kind of agreed upon rules and foundations within the community that's using them. Because if I said horror movie, but what I think of horror in my head is actually a comedy, we're going to have miscommunication. And so in the same way, if I say we're reading an academic article and that means something different to you, then there's going to be miscommunication. And so what you need to understand is when you're reading these articles is that the article itself is adhering to the rules of the academic article within your community. And that's the other sticking point, is that the rules are going to change somewhat depending on which community they appear in. And so you saw this a little bit in last week's, you saw this a little bit in the video that I posted, I think it was on Friday, where I looked at the 2 sample essays, right? Where we saw how the Writing Center community article differed somewhat from the other article. Now, the reason for that difference is because those articles exist within different communities, and so they have to adhere to different rules. So, for example, an article in English is going to be adhering to the rules of that community. So citation style, language, sentence structure, area of focus, topics, all of those things that are interesting to that community. And so that article would have to adhere to that. But on the flip side, if we're looking at an article from the sciences, then that science article is going to have to do everything for that community. So things like timeliness, research, scientific studies, methodologies, things like that. Things that wouldn't appear in the English community. Now, both of those are articles, and they're professional, peer-reviewed articles within different fields, but they differ because they're adhering to rules for different communities. And that's the goal of this assignment, is to take an article that I've assigned you and compare it to an article that you found from your community. And to do that kind of comparison, to figure out, okay, there's some similarities here, sure, they're both written probably professionally and whatever, but what are the differences that you're noticing? What are the things that stick out to you? And what do those tell us about the communities that they belong to and how they differ, right? And so this is where the identification and analysis section comes in. And so, for example, if you're going to go into, say, an article from psychology, right, what you would do is you would go through that and you would think about not what this one article is saying, but how this one article represents the entire genre of articles within psychology. And so you'll do this by looking at the thing as a thing, right? And so instead of looking at the argument the author is making, you're going to look at how is the author organizing the essay, right? Is there a methodology section on top? Is there a research section? Is there a statement of purpose? All of those different things. Is there an abstract What kind of citation style do we see? What kind of language do we see? Do we see a lot of research? What are all of the things that stand out to you that make this a professional article within that community? Because if you can locate those things, then that will clue you into what is important in writing within your community. Because as a representative of articles in your community, this one object is going to give you those basic rules that you should know. So for example, when you go in to write an article on your community later on in your careers, you'll have a better understanding of how those things come together, of how it should be laid out, of what kind of sections you'll need, of what kind of voice, what kind of tone you'll need to use. And so the idea is that by looking at this one example, you can get clued into all those things. Now, to drive the point home then, what you'll do is you'll do the same thing for the article from the writing community, and you'll compare them. You'll say, like, look, this is everything that I know from psychology, and here's what this all tells me about psychology. It tells me they care about this, 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 and that the rules for the community are this, 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 this. And then you'll do that for the Writing Center. And then you'll talk about, like, what are the differences or similarities? What do you notice? Or what do you think that means, right? So for example, you could say something like, well, in psychology we use this citation style because it's focused on timeliness, whereas in the Writing Center they don't, because they're not so much focused on when something happened, but more so on who actually came up with the idea. Again, so these are the kind of comparisons we're going to be using, but what I really want you to focus in on is, what are the elements that you're noticing? What does that tell you about the community? Because it's going to clue you into some things. And so then when you're thinking about that analysis, when you get down to the analysis section, remember what analysis is. It's not as complicated as we can sometimes make it. All we're talking about analysis is we're talking about breaking down something complex in order to understand it better. Right? And so by breaking apart the article that you're looking at into those little pieces in your identification section, instead of having to talk about the article as a whole, you could talk about each of those little pieces. And so break it all apart and say, okay, so what do you think it means that they use APA style? What do you think it means that they use this kind of tone of voice? What do you think it means that they use a lot of research? Or what do you think it means that they use first person, or whatever it is? Right? And so that's how you'll do it. And you'll take each of those elements that you notice and just talk about what you think that means for your community. What does that tell you about your community? What does it tell you about the rules that govern the community? All of those different things. So I hope that helps a little bit, because I know genre analysis can be kind of weird. And so for Friday then, all I'm looking for is that you're starting to do that kind of work, that you're starting to identify those pieces from the articles, and that you're starting to think about, okay, what are those things telling me about? You know, what are these things telling me about these articles? What are they telling me about the communities? Okay. And so ultimately what this means is that when you get to your reflection section, you should be able to say a few things about what you learned about your community, what you learned about genre, what you learned about the genre of the article within your community, whatever it is that you want to talk about. Okay, so I hope that helps. But just to recap, so all we're doing for this week is you're going to review that reading, you're going to take your quiz, and you're going to upload a draft of Project 2 to your peer review groups, which I will be posting up here on Wednesday again. And on Wednesday also I will accompany that with a video, again, just going through peer review, going through anything you want. Now the other thing that I wanted to talk about as well, something that none of you have taken advantage of yet, is that if you'd like, you can set up Skype conferences with me. They'll usually have to be in the evening because I'm watching my son during the day. But I'm always happy to look at drafts, answer questions. I know what's weird is a lot of you have emailed me questions, assuming that it's a bother to answer your questions. That's what I like doing. Email me. Never feel bad about emailing me. Any questions you want, I will get back to you as soon as possible. But yeah, so the Skype conferences. If you want, we can set up a Skype conference so we can pop into Skype or Google Hangouts or whatever it is, and we can talk. Or we can pop into a Google Doc and we can work on a document together. You can show me what you're thinking about and I can make some notes on it. But all of these options are available to you for this kind of support for when you're doing this work. So don't feel like you're on your own in a vacuum having to do this work. I'm here for you in whatever capacity that I can be. So have a great week. I will talk to you guys again on Wednesday. And please let me know if you have any questions. And I will talk to you guys later.